Bob Inglis was a United States congressman representing the 4th Congressional District from 1993 until 1999, and again from 2003 until 2010. These days, he's focused on climate change. I sit down one-on-one with the former congressman for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen to this interview later on iHeartRadio. Congressman Bob Inglis, it's so good to meet you.
Good to meet you, Quintin. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Well, for many years that I've lived on this earth, 34 years, I've known about you and your time as a congressman from 1993 until 1999, and again from 2005 until 2011. And now you are touring a lot of the most popular areas right here to talk about conservative solutions to climate change. And I want to get back to that in just a moment. But first, I want to talk to you about Senator John McCain. Obviously, this country's mourning his passing after his bout with brain cancer. Can you talk to me about your relationship with the senator?
Well, probably the most extended time I spent with him relates to climate change, actually. We were on a science committee trip from the House, and he was leading a Senate trip. And so we spent some time in Antarctica together. That's actually, it's sort of strange to go to Antarctica to meet John McCain. I really spent time, I guess I'd met him before that, but I really spent some time with him in Antarctica.
Yes.
A little bit odd place to spend time with somebody in it.
I was going to say.
But it's really interesting to be there with him. And he's leading a trip with Susan Collins and former Senator John Sununu. And then Sherry Boehlert of the House is leading a House trip. And so those trips overlapped, and we spent some time together in some labs at McMurdo Station and at the South Pole.
Wow, so amazing. Well, let me get back here to the College of Charleston. I know last night you were talking to students basically about free enterprise and climate change. What did you learn from the students about climate change and free enterprise?
I learned that they were interested in hearing a solution that may be a little bit different than what they've heard before. Of course, our effort at republican.org is to engage conservative folks especially, because, progressives are already in on the conversation about climate change. It's conservatives that haven't felt welcomed in the conversation. And so what we do is we throw out a welcome mat, and say, really, you can be part of this conversation. You're a conservative, a fellow conservative. Let's get in the game here. Let's not shrink in science denial because we think we're no good at climate change. We want conservatives to say, no, we got an answer. Yes, we do. We got an answer. How about you? It's basically, the middle school cheer across the gymnasium. So we want to equip conservatives to be able to do that cheer. And of course, the reality is, we think at the end of the day, progressives are going to sound off back to us saying, yeah, we could go for that. Enough would say they'd go for it, and then we can bring America together and then lead the world to a solution on climate change. That's our hope.
As a matter of fact, you have the Encourage Tour Charleston at the Citadel tonight, conservative climate leadership. It's going to happen around 6 to 7:30 at the Mon Hall. And I know that you have a couple of questions that you want people to really contemplate. Can American free enterprise solve climate change? Can conservatives lead us to action? How can citizens that is, summon in our leaders the courage to lead on climate? Let me break down those questions. Can American free enterprise solve climate change? What is the state of free enterprise when you think of it right now?
It's sort of held back in innovation in energy because all the cost, the true cost of the burning of fossil fuels aren't reflected on our power meters or at our gas pumps. And so because they're not reflected there, we don't know how expensive those energy forms are. And we don't see the true cost. If we saw the true cost, we'd be saying, oh, give me something a little bit different. Give me a lot more solar, give me a lot more wind, give me wave energy, give me more nuclear, give me other stuff besides this pretty expensive thing called fossil fuel energy. But the reason we don't see that is the example I was using at the College of Charleston, we'll use at the Citadel, is if I'm Inglis coal-fired electricity, that means I burn coal to heat water, to turn a magneto, to create electricity, to send it to your house. It's a pretty good deal for me because I get to basically socialize my soot. I get to put it up my stack. Stinks for my neighbors. It's great for people down the line, though, away from my plant, because they get what looks like cheap energy. But then when you consider the fact that that soot that I'm sticking up into the trash dump of the sky is creating climate damages, but it's also creating immediate health consequences and cost. And so someday conservatives are going to be able to say, wait a minute, this is not a good deal for us at Inglis, because your cost of that soot that you're putting up in the air, creating health costs, creating climate damages, not by the soot, but by the CO2 in that case, is those costs should be reflected in your product. It's what economists call the internalization of negative externalities. In other words, the negative externality is that these costs I'm imposing on my neighbors and on society by spewing my stuff out of my stack, if I'm forced to be accountable and hold that, be even biblically accountable and hold my ash on my property and do something with my CO2 that I'm creating, then I've got to spend a lot of money to clean up my act. Increases the price of my electricity. And so far that's where we're stuck, because people are saying, wait a minute, we don't want to see the true cost of electricity. It's like playing hide and seek with a 2-year-old, or a 3-year-old. They say, you can't see me, I'm hiding. And so that's where we are with the cost of climate change. You can't see me, I'm hiding. But those are real costs. Health costs, climate damages, are being caused by me at Inglis coal-fired electricity. I'm getting away with it. And so make me accountable. The price goes up of my supposedly cheap coal-fired electricity. But at that point, wind and solar come in, and wave energy or nuclear or new things come to bear, and they can beat me in the free enterprise system. Now, it stinks for me, but if I've got an old stinky way of making electricity, isn't it better? What we conservatives have typically said is better for society if the new competitor can take me out. And it's an odd thing right now with my party and conservatives generally, is we're sort of holding on to the old. We don't want to let go of it. We want to hug that barrel of oil. It's so sweet to us. We want to hug it. We want to hug that coal. So nice. And it's strange, because normally we're the people who say, no, let creative destructionism occur in the capitalistic system, and let's see innovation.
And another question that I want to break down is this: can conservatives lead us to action? Who else should be leading this discussion to action?
Yeah. Well, we think that at republicunion.org, we think that conservatives are the indispensable partners in the indispensable nation. This isn't going to happen without America, and America isn't going to act without conservatives being on board. And so the good news is there are many progressives ready to act on climate change, and many who would accept this very rock-solid conservative solution. They would say, yeah, that works. It's basically just put all the cost in, eliminate the subsidies, and let's let the free enterprise system sort this out. It does start with the government action, which is bringing that accountability. But we need for conservatives to enter this conversation and to say, we got an answer to this. We can deal with this. We don't have to shrink in science denial.
And another answer that you want from this particular question: how can citizens summon in our leaders the courage to lead on climate? Where have the leaders been?
Well, they basically engaged us in some superstitions, if you will, or some sort of belief system that isn't based on data. It's basically, they've told us that climate change isn't real because we don't want it to be real. And I can understand that. Denial is something we all do, right? I mean, if you have a medical condition, let's say you see something on your skin, you know you should go to the doctor to see about it because it could be melanoma. You hope it's basal cell carcinoma, and it's not a big a problem as melanoma. But you look at it and you delay, you deny. And then when you go, it might just be too late. And so it's better to go ahead and face those things. And so what we've engaged in, I think, starting with the Great Recession, is this idea of let's just delay this, let's put this off. We got other things we're worried about right now. In the Great Recession, it's sort of like this. People said to me, I think, when I lost in the Republican primary in June of 2010, is basically, Inglis, we're hemorrhaging over here, hemorrhaging jobs in this Great Recession. Our houses are underwater, financially in terms of the mortgage and the value of the home. And so that's the hemorrhaging. We'll worry about the slow-growing cancer of climate change later. They were sort of in a triage situation. Let's take care of this first, and we'll worry about the long-term things later. Well, we've dealt with the hemorrhaging. The Great Recession's over. So let's think about this longer-term challenge. It's actually not real long-term. It's happening right now in places like Charleston with clear day flooding and things like that.
You talk about Charleston, you talk about flooding as it rains here right now. Obviously, there's a big discussion right now about offshore drilling. Where are you with this discussion?
I don't think we need to do that. I think it's risky for our coast, and it's the old technology. Why do we want to keep on drilling in the dirt when we could drill in our heads for a better way to make energy? We're going to use petroleum for a while, but wouldn't it be great to break out of this dependence we have on a resource that some very unstable places in the world have a lot of? I'd like to be able to say to the Middle East, see if you can drink that stuff. We just don't need you anymore. It'd be a very real world changer. It'd be a game changer for us if we weren't dependent on it. The swing supplier is Saudi Arabia. And so God cooked it all the way and left it right at the surface. And they've got cheap ways to extract it, and they will always be the swing supplier. And so why we want to be dependent on them? And why we want to enrich them? Why not drive on sunshine, or wind, or wave, or nuclear? Drive our cars as well as heat our homes and cool our homes with those things. And clean up the air. Create jobs here. Why keep on going at this old technology? So I got two reasons to not be in favor of offshore drilling. One is the risk of the South Carolina coast, and then the second is, why keep on investing in a technology that's dying, that will be gone? We better be gone. We need for it to be gone. Just like whale oil was how we used to power things. We don't do that much anymore, whale oil. And so let's move on from petroleum, just like petroleum was a replacement for coal for transportation. So whale oil to coal to petroleum, well, let's move on to the next thing. And the immediate next is probably natural gas in a lot of cases, because it's cleaner burning, less CO2. But let's keep on moving. That's what the free enterprise system does. If you fix the economics, it can move more rapidly than government could ever imagine.
You talk about a game changer. I got to take you to the 1st Congressional District. It's heating up between Democrat Joe Cunningham and Republican Katie Ayrton after she knocked off Congressman Mark Sanford in May. How do we get here with this race in your mind?
How did we get here? Or
yeah.
Well, I think full disclosure, Mark is a friend of mine, and so I'm feeling for Mark right now mostly because I know what it's like. I lost a Republican primary, and now Mark sadly has lost a Republican primary, and it's somewhat analogous to the situation I had. I lost in the midst of the Great Recession. Mark has lost in something that's sort of Great Recession plus. It's the uncertainty that shouldn't be there because the Great Recession is now over and the economy's better. But it's sort of the angst of what the future is going to hold, plus a tribalism that seems to have taken hold. I hope temporarily, but that's what happened to Mark, I think, is this tribalism of just that Mark spoke against Dear Leader. Of course, I don't think we should be afraid of speaking against Dear Leader. We don't live in North Korea. We live in America, and if you don't like something President Trump is doing, you got a right to say it. And to help him correct himself, if he can. I mean, if he acts like Dear Leader, maybe he can't correct himself. But normal, well-adjusted people can hear criticism and say, you know, you're right. It's wrong how I said that. I should have said it this other way. I remember one time, for example, George W. Bush. I had been to Iraq. In fact, I guess this was Afghanistan that Mark Sanford and I went with Lindsey Graham and some others. But I was 4 times in Afghanistan, 5 times in Iraq. And on one of the occasions when I came back from Iraq, President Bush was always interested in hearing from delegations that had gone to Iraq. So he had us over to the White House. And on this occasion, he had us over to, he had us to the residence. That's when they're really trying to impress you. They invite you upstairs, or they're trying to sort of get to you, you know. And so he had us in the residence, and that morning at the house gym, I was standing at the sink with a friend, and I told him, George W. Bush is saying the wrong thing about Iraq. He says we got to stay the course. And I said, it's not good enough. And so I was sitting in the living room in the White House upstairs with the president. He asked for comments. And so I said, well, if you're going to say it at the gym this morning, you got to say it to his face, Bob. So go ahead and tell him. So I raised my hand. He called on me, and I said, what you're saying, sir, is not good enough about Iraq. You keep saying we got to stay the course. You shouldn't say that, Mr. President. You should say we should push through. A couple of days later, he came over to the Capitol to speak to the Republican conference. He was speaking, and he said, we got to stay the course. He said, and then he stopped himself. He said, correction. We've got to push forward, and this is something like that. And so the session ended. I thought he'd left the room, so I had my back turned to where he'd been. Right. And he called out to me. He said, Inglis. And I turned around and said, yes, sir. He said, I changed what I said. Did you notice? And that's you gotta, if you're president, you gotta be able to hear from somebody that, Mr. President, you're not saying it right. You're not doing it right. You gotta change it. And you gotta be willing to change. So Mark Sanford apparently had the guts and the courage to say, no, the president's wrong when he said such and so and so and so. Katie Arrington turned that into a commercial. He was, all this never Trumper stuff. And so, what are we supposed to do? Not say anything to a president? Let him cruise on and make mistakes that he's making? Or is there friend somebody who says, no, I think you're wrong, George W. Bush, when you said that. And then George W. Bush able to be big enough say, yeah, Bob, you're right. I think I'm going to change what I say. So I think Mark was doing President Trump a great favor. But he got drummed out because it seemed like he was being against Dear Leader. Really? That America and North Korea?
Congressman Bob Inglis, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Good to be with you.
Likewise. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Quintin.
Thank you.